This conference will now be recorded.
Well, good evening, everybody. It's yet another week in La La Land, I think. But anyway, tonight I wanted to talk about the new CARES Act that Congress passed last week and President Trump signed into law on Friday. So there's a number of provisions in here. There's a lot that I'm not going to cover. I'm going to cover what I think is most important to small business and what I think is most important to individuals. So there's a new loan program that's been put into place. The idea is that if you are a small business defined as 500 or fewer employees, you can borrow an amount, the lesser of your average monthly payroll between now and the end of the year, the mortgage payments, rent payments, and other debt obligations. You take that number times 4. You can either borrow that amount or $10 million, whichever is less. You can use that loan money. The idea is that if you use the loan money to pay for employment, for employees, for employee taxes, mortgage payments, rent payments, and other debt obligations, then you have a very low interest rate or a forgiven debt at the end of all of this. So for those businesses that are struggling to keep their doors open but want to keep their employees employed, I think this is really good. It also kind of helps with the idea that if people stop making their mortgage payments or their rent payments, then we're going to have a lot of defaults on mortgages and a lot of foreclosures. So to try and avoid that and a crash in the real estate market is the whole idea behind it. Now, for things that are more important to individuals, the payment to the individuals, if the individual has filed their 2019 return or their 2018 return, and they have on there a bank account that they wanted their money deposited into, then the payments that are coming out, the $1,200 per adult and the $500 per child on the returns will be direct deposited to their bank account. The money goes to individuals who earn $75,000 or less, with a decreasing amount up to $99,000 and above $99,000 for an individual. There is no check coming. Or a married couple, $150,000, and above $198,000, there is no check coming. So a married couple with 2 children should expect to receive $3,400 if they have less than that $150,000 of income. Now, income is not your adjusted gross income. Income is earned income. So earned income is defined as wages. It's self-employment income, so Schedule C income. It's farm income. Those would all be considered earned income. It's Social Security and any compensation in the form of pension payouts, IRA payouts, 401k payouts. Those are all going to be considered income for getting this money. What's not going to be considered is capital gains, interest, and dividends. So if your tax return says your adjusted gross income is $170,000, but you have $25,000 of long-term or short-term capital gains, then you still would qualify for this money. And the government's going to look at those tax returns and send out accordingly. So we've been trying to get everybody's returns done that would fall into that bracket so that they would get that check with the first round of payments. Now, for those of you who make estimated, well, for those of you who owe money with your tax return first, if you owe money with your tax return, normally it would be due April 15th. But because the tax return is not due until July 15th, your payment is not due until July 15th. So you can file your return now. You can pay July 15th. There's no interest or penalty that will accrue that you'll have to pay at that point. So I would say file your return as soon as possible, because you might be getting a refund from Oregon because there's the kicker on the returns, and then wait until July 15th to pay your federal. You may get a letter in the meantime from the government. They have this really nasty habit of sending out these computer letters that say, gee, we received your return, but are you aware that you didn't make your payment? Well, of course you're aware you didn't make your payment. You didn't make it because you didn't want to, and you didn't have to. So just take those letters and kind of set them aside and don't worry about them. It'll all get cleared up when you make your payment in July. If you normally pay estimated tax payments, the first, second, and third quarter estimated tax payments are not due until October 15th. So there is absolutely no reason to be paying the first, second, and third quarter. Our tax program hasn't quite caught up. It's still kicking out 4 coupons. And if I only elect to have 2 coupons, it's putting 3/4 of the payment on the one that would be due in September, and 1/4 on the one that would be due in January. We're just going to have to kind of make adjustments for that. And the coupon says September 15th. It's not due until October 15th, and that's really when I would pay it. Hopefully our software gets caught up real quick here and adjusts and makes so that those coupons make more sense. So the other part that is really interesting is that you can now take, so there's some caveats. I'm going to go down to the caveats first. I kind of wrote this backwards, but if you qualify for this provision, you have to have been tested positive for COVID, have your spouse or a dependent or someone in your household tested positive for COVID, experienced adverse financial consequences because you were quarantined, laid off, had reduced hours, had somebody sick in your household, had to take time off from work because your children were not in school, and so therefore you had reduced income. So if you, or other reasons, is the way the code's written, and the for other reasons is to be defined by Congress at some later date. So, normally when Congress does that, it's pretty much pick a reason and it will fly until they get around to writing the actual code. So what this provision says is that you can, if you're employed, you can take up to $100,000 out of a 401k, 403b, 457 qualified retirement plan. You roll it into an IRA, and then you can take that money out of your IRA and not pay it back for 3 years. If you fail to pay it back within that 3-year time period, it becomes taxable income to you, but no penalty. So it's not a bad scenario to kind of think about what you could do here. If it's already in an IRA and you don't need the money, there is really no reason to take it out and pay the tax, unless if you are under age 59 and a half and you think that you won't get your job back soon, that would be a reason to take it out. If you're under 59 and a half and this year is going to be a really low income year, it might make sense to pull some of that 100,000 out and put it into a brokerage account, or take some of that 100,000 and roll it into a Roth, so that you have ability to then draw on it at some point in a tax-free fashion. You can do that without penalty. You could do the Roth conversion without penalty anyway, but you wouldn't be able to normally take it out and put it into a brokerage account in case you need it. This now becomes your emergency fund in case you need it, in case there's a round 2 or 3 of COVID, and this extends along much longer than what you might think. So you have to take this money out between March 27th, which was the date of enactment of the bill, and the end of the year. If you get close to the end of the year and you go, I don't think this is going to end, I don't think I'm getting my job back, that would be a really good time to take that distribution from your 401k, roll it into an IRA, and then roll it out, the part that you think you might need. Now, you have 2001, 2002, and 2003 to pay this money back. If you say, I don't think that I'm going to have money, excess money come 2000, I think somebody maybe needs to mute their phone. We're getting a bit of feedback. If you could do that, that would help. So if you get to the end of the year and you think you're going to not get your job back in 2001, or it's going to be a tough year, or you've decided to go back to school and you're not going to have a job, you really do need to take that withdrawal before 12/31/20, because after 12/31/20, you don't have the ability to put the money back if you want to, number one. And if you're under 59.5, it would be tax plus penalty if you draw this money out in 2021. So this is a really big planning point. Certainly something that you want to come and talk to us about if you're thinking about doing this. The other thing that came up earlier was one of my clients said he really doesn't like the company that's managing his 401k. They're having to take reduced work hours because they're working from home. They're not going to lose their jobs, but certainly reduce work hours, which is a qualifier for this. He doesn't like the company that manages the 401k, so he's going to roll $100,000 out so that it can be managed better, more constructively for these times. And then if for some reason he would lose his job, he would then have access to those funds. So that's another reason why you might want to use this provision. So that's something that I think would be really good if you came and talked to one of us about before you did it. And then we made that plan and decision based on all the facts. If you do want to take the money out of your 401k, but you don't want to put it into an IRA, you can take a loan from your 401k. So say you still have your job, it's you don't qualify for the $100,000 rollover, but you want to take some money out. They have now changed the rules. For forever, the rule on loans from 401ks was 100% of your vested account balance or $50,000, whichever was less. So now they've changed that $50,000 to $100,000. So it's now you can take a loan from your 401k up to $100,000 or your vested account balance, the lesser of. And you don't have to start paying back that loan until 2021. And then that loan will, just like normal, come back out of your paycheck. So those are some things that you might want to do. Taking that loan because you think you might need the money, taking that loan because there's some things you want to do with that money in the short term and then paying it back, or taking the money out of the 401k, rolling it to an IRA, and then withdrawing from that IRA as you need it. The other thing that when Congress passed the last Tax Act that started into effect in 2018, where they made the standard deduction so much larger, took away personal exemptions, it really has hurt charities because people have not been able to deduct that charitable contribution, so they haven't been giving to charities, and yet that is not Congress's intent. They really need people to be giving to charities, particularly now, because it's those charities that are going to be a big part in getting America through this problem. So they said that if you put $300 of cash, not goods, into a charity, you can take that deduction in addition to your normal standard deduction. So this might be something that if you haven't been giving because you weren't getting a deduction, that you can still take your standard deduction, and on top of that, you'll get that $300 per return, not per taxpayer, as a deduction. So if you're an individual, a single person, you get 300. If you're a married couple, you get 300. For businesses, you don't have to pay your estimated taxes till October 15th, just like individuals. And you will pay it 50% on October 15th and 50% in January 15th. That would be for S corporations, not for LLCs, or I mean for C corporations, not S corporations or LLCs. It also applies to trusts, that their taxes wouldn't be due until October 15th and January 15th of next year. Now, part of this provision for businesses is it's supposed to be starting April 1st through the end of the year. Businesses are not supposed to withhold Social Security or Medicare from their employees' paychecks. The employer normally would pay in a matching amount for Social Security and Medicare, but that matching amount is deferred and doesn't have to be paid in until 2021 and 2022, 50% in each year. The Congress has said that they will make up from some other source, which I can't imagine where from, the money that would have been taken out of paychecks so that Social Security and Medicare will stay funded during this period of time. But we'll see if that happens, because they typically borrow from Social Security and don't ever get around to paying it back. If you have a student loan, you don't have to pay it for the next 3 months, and interest will not accrue on that loan. Now, the caveat here is that it has to be a federal student loan. So if you've had a federal student loan and you refinance it through one of the other institutes that offer student loans, this may or may not apply. If you've refinanced it and you're paying your second on your house, this definitely doesn't apply. So make sure who you pay that student loan to find out if this provision will apply or not. Don't just stop paying it and find out 3 months later that there are going to be some penalties accruing and interest if you don't pay it. Now, the other thing that came up is that you're not required to take an RMD for 2020. And Congress's thought process was that all the account balances had gone up quite high at the end of the year. And then, of course, we know that this year, the market is down, depending on which day you look at it, somewhere between 20 and 30%. So if people were taking out their RMDs, which are based on the prior 12/31 balance, they'd be taking out a much larger percentage than what they would be taking out if they were basing it on today's balance. And so they said, you don't have to take out your RMD for 2020. But once again, this is a pretty good planning position, because if you're normally taking that RMD out, and you would be able to now take, say your RMD is normally 15,000, you'd be able to take that RMD and move it as a Roth conversion. You'd still have to pay the tax on the 15,000 like you normally would, but if this is a low income year for other reasons, then that would give you the ability to make that Roth conversion in a low income year. If you've taken money from your IRA, if you've taken the 100,000 from your IRA, this may not be a great idea, but if you take the 100,000 from your IRA and you want to do an RMD, at least it would give you some money to pay the tax, or you make your RMD and take the tax money out of that penalty-free extended payback period from your IRA. So there's, once again, some really good planning opportunities within this bill. There are a ton of other issues within this bill that we aren't going to talk about tonight, but if you read something, call me, ask me. I've read the bill, so it's just that it goes on for 880 pages. I could not get the full 880-page bill. I was only able to pull up on the internet the short version, which was 220 pages. So I'm sure I'm even missing some of the nuances, but if you have a question, let me know, and I will do my best to go and find out. So are there questions that people have with regard to this?
What happened?
So people need to keep in mind that if they take the unemployment, it is fully taxable, and you would probably be well off to make an estimated tax payment in October. If you're retired, but you have a self-employment business, so you do gardening for people, or you, make candy and sell it, or whatever. If you have a self-employment business that you can no longer do because of COVID, you are now unemployed as a self-employed person and should be entitled to that $600 a week for 4-month self-employment provision. So just because you're retired, don't think that this doesn't apply to you, because if you have a cottage industry business, it definitely applies to you, because all the cottage industry businesses are not going to be able to earn money in any capacity while this is in place. I can't imagine being able to do much without people worrying about, the disease coming with the product. So think outside the box, think in terms of what there is out there. This bill is costing the American taxpayers $2.2 trillion. Now, we were already at about almost 24 trillion before this started. This is an additional 2.2 trillion, and Congress is working on a new bill, a new stimulus package, which Trump has asked them to make another $2 trillion. So this provision, this CARES Act, took us from about 24 to 26. If Congress spends another $2 trillion, it'll take us from 26 to 28. They were already $1 trillion in the hole on our budget, so we'll probably be pretty close to $30 trillion of debt by the time we get through this. So with that in mind, use the portions of this bill that are important. Use the things that work well. This is a really low income year. If you can adjust your life so that this is a really low income year, or more importantly, that next year is a really low income year. If you were to get to the end of the year and you say, I'm going to need that money out of my IRA, be sure and take it before December 31. But if you say, you know what, if I take that money out of my IRA, then I take out 100,000 and I don't spend any other money in 2021, and you got your Social Security, but if you're a married couple, that's below the Social Security being tax limit, and so you lived on just your Social Security and that IRA, and perhaps you have to take an RMD, but if you converted a good chunk of it in 2020 into a Roth, your RMD may be pretty small. This may be a really good year. Then you'd say, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and pay the tax on that, on the 1/3 of that IRA distribution, because my tax rate is now 10% or 15% federal and 7% Oregon, and I'm going to go ahead and pay it this year. That might not be a bad tax strategy. And if you can keep that going in 2022 and 2023, getting that money out of your IRA, either as Roth conversions in 2020, and then using the 100,000 in 2021, 22, and 23, and holding on to all of your other money, might not be a bad strategy, but I think it's something we need to look at together. So if this looks like something you might want to try, then get a hold of one of us and let's do some planning and make sure that it's going to work. And if it's going to work, what the tax consequences are, and if that's a better strategy than leaving it all inside your IRA and having to take really large RMDs in 21, 22, and 23 instead of transitioning this money in a better fashion. So I think that there's some definite possibilities here. And as I say, if you're self-employed, there's some definite possibilities for getting that extra self-employment money. I mean, it's you don't want to go and say you're just going to take it and hurt somebody else, but on the other hand, we're the ones who paid in, and this is kind of money that we have never used. Most of us have never drawn unemployment, so this might be a way to get back some of that money that was considered a benefit when you were working. So questions, because we have about 5 minutes left to the session if you have questions. No? Well, then I think I'll go ahead and end it here. And the market, as I say, is it ended up last week in stellar fashion. It started this week pretty good, and it down days. We are looking at in the moderate portfolios buying some utilities. We put some of the inflation protected bonds in last week, buying some utilities and some more of the defensive stocks as we ride through this. I think that there's definitely some opportunities to start buying. I think April will probably be a really big pullback month. And then depending upon where we are with this disease, June may look like a good slow buying month. Really the most important word of the day is patience. Patience with the market, patience with yourself, patience with your family if you're locked in a way that you haven't ever been. Patience with the entire community, because everybody's in this together and everybody is having those same moments of anxiety. When I was watching the news this morning and they showed a refrigerated semi-truck back up to one of the hospitals in New York that's being converted, that semi-truck is being converted into a makeshift morgue because there's not enough room in mortuaries to hold the bodies. That's a pretty chilling and terrifying event. And I think at that moment, you just need to take a breath and go, we'll all get through this. The blue sky will be there eventually. Just be patient. So if there are no questions, I'm going to go ahead and close off at this point. So one last opportunity. So I want to thank you all for logging on today, and hopefully we'll see you logging on next week too.
Sure.